Hi everyone, question for you. Do you know the difference between real leadership versus counterfeit leadership? You don't? Okay, good. I'll explain. Now, I could just say leadership, but I've added this qualifier real to distinguish it from fake or counterfeit leadership. What do I mean? Very simply, real leadership gets people to face reality. Counterfeit leadership causes people to avoid dealing with reality. Real leadership gets people to address the true problem, the real issue. Counterfeit leadership results in pursuing decoy issues. Real leadership stimulates the creative process. Counterfeit leadership dampens the creative process. Real leadership helps individuals and groups make important adaptations to respond to changes in the environment. Counterfeit leadership seeks to bypass the adaptive work, getting people to focus on quick fixes and simple solutions. Real leadership gets people to take personal responsibility for an issue, a challenge or a problem. Counterfeit leadership externalizes the problem. It blames others. Now, real leadership puts the real issue, the primary concern, the important work at the center of attention. Counterfeit leadership puts the dominant authority figure at the center. The attention is on the boss or a secondary issue or a false concern. The list could go on, but let me stop there and tease out some of these points a little bit more. First, real leadership is about getting people to face reality. The assumption being that confronting reality is more important than avoiding reality. Whether you're an individual, a group, a company, or a nation, you have to face the reality of your condition. You have to face the reality of a change in the environment. You have to face the reality of threats and dangers. Now, the great Socrates, 500 years ago, said it is important to distinguish between the shadows and the essence of a problem. The shadows are superficial. They are a manifestation of the problem, but not the essence of the problem. It's not easy to get to the essence of things. To get to the essence, you have to work your way through competing interpretations and often conflicting perspectives, assumptions, and values. Now, you may not like the essence. You may not like that reality. It might be too confronting, too unpleasant. For example, no one likes to be told that they are a part of the problem. Sometimes reality hurts. So it's easier to displace that responsibility, to dismiss it, or project the blame onto others. Now, I remember the former CEO of IBM, Lou Gerstner. Many years ago, he came to Harvard and he told our students about how he turned around IBM when it was on the verge of collapse. It had been the number one company in the world for a long time, and then for over a decade it was in decline, and it had become a shell of its former self. New competitors, new tech businesses had emerged and essentially gobbled up IBM's customers and their market. IBM was too big, too slow, and too rigid. Now, the new CEO was brought in from outside. That was Lou Gerstner. He did his analysis of the company, and he found that the executives were avoiding the reality of the changes in the marketplace. They were oblivious to the new technologies that were emerging. They weren't listening to the customer. Their focus was on internal politics and status, things like job titles or the size of their office or the proximity of their car park to the entrance of the building, things like that. They had lost touch with the realities they had to attend to become or to maintain their position as a competitive, successful business. They were focused on the wrong set of issues, the wrong set of priorities. Now, Gerstner's leadership challenge was to get them to face that reality and figure out what the customer wanted, what aspects of the business should be kept and promoted, what should be discarded, and what new innovations or business possibilities should be pursued. All of that required a major cultural shift. The prevailing culture was a swamp. You had to slog your way through it to get anything of significance done. It wasn't conducive to straight talk, honest, open conversation, or productive problem solving. Now, this is what Gerstner said about that. He said the company didn't lack for smart people. Its problems weren't fundamentally technical in nature. It had a file drawer full of winning strategies, yet the company was frozen in place. What it needed was someone to grab hold of it and shake it back into action. And Gerstner succeeded in doing just that. He shook it back into action. He wrote a great book on the subject, if you're interested. It's called Who says elephants can't dance? I'll put the link below. Now, as humans, we're not good at dealing with some aspects of reality, particularly if it is complex or threatening, or if it requires a change in our behavior, our values, or priorities. Plus, we're all very busy. We have so many things to attend to. It's very easy to become complacent with our heads down and focusing on the immediate tasks in front of us, or to be distracted, like at IBM, by office politics and get lost in the wrong set of issues and just drift along out of habit in the prevailing cultural river. And sometimes we just don't care. It's too hard. Let someone else worry about it. So we become apathetic or complacent. Or what often happens is we put our trust in others, someone to tell us, is this a problem worth worrying about or not? And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, we may end up pursuing the wrong set of issues or embracing delusions, fantasies, pipe dreams, or an unhealthy dependency on authority results, weakening the problem-solving capacity of others. Now, in these kinds of situations, the reality of the problem, the challenge, the issues, they're never fully addressed. They're never fully confronted and tackled. The essence of the problem is neglected, and the dynamics of avoidance, of mediocrity, of decay, of rust, all that sets in. Then this can lead to a breakdown of some sort, or in a worst-case scenario, things fall apart, things collapse. And that's why leadership is needed, to get people to face what they don't want to face, what they are avoiding, to attend to what they need to attend to in order to resolve their problems, to advance and to progress. Now, to do that, sometimes leadership work is very confronting, even provocative. You have to shake people up, particularly when the problem is critical and urgent and people are distracted or complacent. And sometimes to engage people, rather than be provocative, it is better to be evocative, to evoke a positive response from people through invitation, education, illumination, or inspiration. And other times, time might be on your side, and therefore the leadership work is to ripen the issue and help people steadily appreciate the essence of the problem and gain a clearer understanding over time. Irrespective of your approach, you want to accompany your leadership work, your change agent work, with forthright, honest, straightforward conversation, straight talk around what you see, what others see, and engage in a process of examining competing assumptions, interpretations, and perspectives to figure out what really is going on, what you might be missing, what others might be missing, and what's the best way to move forward, or at least what that next step might be. In doing that, getting people to face reality is approached as a sense-making process, a learning experience. Now, second, once you confront the challenge, real leadership is needed to get people to do the heavy lifting of what we call adaptive work, the kind of work that requires a shift in thinking and priorities. With adaptive work, people have to make some kind of change, an adjustment in their behavior or their values, or progress on the challenge. Resolution of that situation of irresolution will not happen. Success will be elusive. Now, sometimes that change or adaptation is within a group. Sometimes the adaptation is in the relationship between groups, in that interactive dynamic. It's more of a systemic change. Now, while we're on the subject of adaptive work, let me say a little bit more about adaptation, why we use that term. Adaptive work is just like adaptation in nature. An animal or an organism has to make an adaptation when their environment changes, or they will perish. They cannot persist in doing what they have always done, because that is insufficient for their survival. Now, old habits or practices that might have worked in the past have now become maladaptive in the changed environment. Likewise for human beings, individually or in groups, we have to make adaptations in order to respond to changed conditions, new threats, or whatever, because what we have been doing in the past or in the present has become maladaptive in that new context. Now, in the animal kingdom, nature is cruel. The adaptive process is cruel. There's a lot of loss. The competitive world of business and free markets is also cruel. Politics within nations and between nations can be very cruel. Now, others may not care if you suffer or drop by the wayside. So if you are to stick around, if you are to survive, and better still, if you are to thrive, you better have enough leadership in the system to stir and orchestrate important adaptations. Now the third aspect of real leadership. Real leadership stimulates creative thinking and innovation. Humans have this extraordinary capacity for imagination, experimentation, creativity, and play. We can innovate when we dedicate time, energy, and resources to the process. Now, it's not easy, as creative work is a form of adaptive work. It's messy work. It's not business as usual. And because it's not business as usual, you cannot rely on your past. It's now a voyage of discovery and adventure, so to speak. You are operating at the frontier of your competence, the frontier of the challenge. There's a lot of unknowns. Now, the intention of creative work is to speed up the adaptive process with the hope that an innovation or a breakthrough result can be generated that can help the larger system respond to changed conditions and better solve its problems and advance forward in a positive direction. Now, let me just say a little bit more about creative work. When we think of creativity, we often think of the lone, isolated, troubled soul doing extraordinary work on their own through struggle and suffering, with little support from the larger environment. And yes, that is true for many people. But I'm not talking about individual creativity per se. But the kind of creativity I'm talking about is the creative process, where multiple people or groups from diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and areas of expertise interact to explore possibilities and innovative solutions beyond the limits of their particular domain of knowledge and expertise. It is in that interactive dynamic where there is a sharing of perspectives, mutual curiosity, and learning that the potential for creativity emerges. Now, it requires leadership to stimulate that and to manage it and to bring an innovation to fruition. It is a fragile, precarious process. I mean, it can fall apart so easily as things can get very tense. There can be very serious conflicts and disagreements. But that tension, when well managed, can produce the sparks that ignite the creativity that produces the innovation. Now, one more thing about real leadership. We've been talking about problem-solving, change, and innovation. There's another aspect that most people, change agents, authority figures, don't appreciate or recognize as an element of leadership work. That's what I call the maintenance challenge. Preservation work. Not everything has to change. It's not all change, 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 change. Sometimes the work is to protect and preserve critical values, practices, and features of group life, community life, organizational life, whatever it might be. If you lose certain features or elements, it can be like losing a part of your soul, something that's very essential. So we know human beings can sometimes go crazy in their revolutionary zest or transformational pursuits. They can become zealots very easily. Now, I've been reading a lot lately about China under Mao Zedong. They had what is called the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. And in the Cultural Revolution, they went about humiliating or imprisoning scholars, philosophers, officials, merchants, important contributors to society because they weren't seen to be towing the party line. They weren't pure ideologues or champions of the cause, so to speak. Or they were too traditional. So the idea was to teach them a lesson or to get rid of them, figuratively or literally. Now, to illustrate how bad it got, they even had an anti-Confucianism campaign. The intention was to get rid of the thoughts and teachings and principles and practices of Confucius. Now, Confucianism had been the backbone of Chinese culture and governance for more than 2,000 years. Over the centuries, it had changed and it had adapted, and it worked relatively well. Officials and scholars studied the works of Confucius and the great Chinese classics that focused on human development, service, and contribution. In the Cultural Revolution, the fanatics tried to wipe out 2,000 years of culture and civilization and wisdom just like that. In leadership work and in adaptive work, as my colleague Ronald Heifetz would say, you have to wrestle with what is precious and what is expendable. And in doing that, you don't toss the baby out with the bathwater, as the saying goes. Now, I know my definition of real leadership and adaptive work raises all sorts of questions. I can hear you now. Who defines what is real? Who defines what is progress? Who defines what is moral? This is why you cannot leave these questions to one person or group to determine the answer. You have to wrestle with these questions. What is real? What is important? What does progress or success look like? What is urgent? What is not urgent? It needs a lot of back and forth to figure this out. This is why we call it adaptive work. Adaptive work is interactive learning, deep learning, systemic learning. You are learning your way through these tough questions, dilemmas, and competing interpretations and conflicting priorities. You are learning your way through the array of experiments and the occasional breakdowns you're going to experience. You are learning your way through the process of change. You are learning your way into the future, is a way of saying it. There you are. These are the demands and challenges of real leadership. Okay. Feel free to join the conversation in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And let's talk more in the next video. Take care and see you soon.